Assassin's Promise by Thomas Woodward. Chapter 31. Millie lay back restlessly in her seat. They had broken camp just after first light, and now the sun was about a quarter of the way up from the horizon. Light spilled through the window of the caravan and heated up the seats inside. Kayana had climbed out outside to check the fastenings on their luggage. The bulky caravan had been piled high with provisions and enough water to make their way to the next major town. How far off that was, she had no idea. She had thought she had seen a tiny speck of a village that had dotted the horizon earlier this morning before they had set off. Pausing mid-thought, she was curious if it would still be in view. Quickly unfastening herself from her seat, she climbed over the other seat, happy that no one had witnessed her unladylike behavior. Gerald was up with old Jess, the driver. She could faintly hear them chatting up at the front of the wagon behind the horses. The wagon moved briskly along, the horses having been trained well and meticulously cared for by the aged wagon driver. Millie could feel the baked earth beneath them as the caravan rumbled along, the occasional bump jostling her slightly. All in all, it was a very smooth ride. Crawling up to the other window, she pulled herself forward on her stomach, not wanting to lose her balance as she looked out the window. Rock formations peppered the landscape. She could see small, stubby bushes that must subsist on the smallest amounts of water she could imagine. They were a brownish tan and looked to be on the brink of existence. A small lizard slithered behind a rock, then sat sunning itself. As the wagon passed, the small creature turned its head and flared its neck, a hood expanding around its head suddenly like a cobra. Strange patterns of red and green crisscrossed the lizard. Millie knew from one she had seen before that they were poisonous. Looking past the rocky shelf with winded carved caverns, she could see the horizon line. There it was. She could barely make it out. A small brown dot on the horizon. It was roughly in the same position she had seen it this morning. Pulling herself back into the wagon, she began to clamber back over to her seat before she noticed Kayana sitting in her customary middle seat. The young woman smiled brightly, the hint of mirth obvious in her eyes. Blushing in embarrassment, Millie hastily returned to her seat. Kayana nodded approvingly to her. Simple movement is often best. What did you see, Millie? This landscape is beautiful in its own way. The life is there, only on a smaller scale. But the sky, it is like a beautiful painting. It seems endless. Kayana looked fondly out the window, a subtle rapture painting her features. She then moved into another one of her poses, stretching her arms and torso fluidly. Gerald thinks we will reach our meeting point soon. There will be a caravan of other traders, each moving westward towards the larger cities. We will resupply after meeting up with them. Not to mention we will be safer traveling as a group. These are wild lands past a certain point, uncharted except by the bravest of mapmakers. My sword is fast, but it would be better to have 10 with us, or 30. Kayana did not seem concerned by this statement, made so simply. She seemed almost excited at the prospective challenge. Millie stared back out her window, gazing the other direction from the other woman. She looked at the rocky outcroppings and weaving caverns in a different light. They now appeared ominous. Could it really be dangerous, like Kayana said? But there was nothing out here. There was barely life, so far remote were they into the desert. With a curious glance, she looked back towards Kayana. The other woman had already started meditating silently in her seat, inwardly focused intensely by her posture. A small bead of sweat slicked the woman's brow, although her face seemed smooth and unworried. Millie wanted this strength. It was apart from a physical thing, but it held power. She was sure of it. She wondered if she could learn this herself. It would give her a sure advantage in the courts and a game of intrigue. Of that she was without doubt. Millie brought her gaze back to the window of the wagon. She had heard of bandits, but not in the middle of the desert. There was simply no way to subsist out in the elements without the protection of the town. With gradual realization, she realized they must be more common occurrence out in the west towards the coast. She had faith in her guards, but even still, she looked at the passing wind-blown caves with a worried eye. Surely they would be safe under the protection of a full caravan of merchant wagons. It occurred to her that it would also make them a great target, with all the precious wares the merchants would no doubt be carrying among their wagons. Amid the current heat of the day, Millie felt a sudden chill, sitting back into her seat. What could she do? When she had gone off adventuring with Eddie, they had no concept of being waylaid by bandits. It would have been laughable to even consider the possibility. About the only thing they could have been waylaid by would be a stray horse from the village. She had no experience defending herself. She was only 13 summers. She felt incredibly small just then. Had her parents known, even before she had departed, the risks of travel out in the open? Is that why they had hired Kayana and Gerald to be her guards? Her hired guards seemed so peaceful and friendly. She had a hard time thinking of them in a dangerous situation. But she supposed they must have experience. How else could they have been hired for the job? Her mother, Marie, had sent a missive to her distant aunt Saraz to meet with Millie and act as her official tie, requesting her tutelage in the ways of being a noble lady of the court. Millie didn't understand much of why she was being sent in the first place. She had slowly come to accept that it would happen over the years, growing up, but she never understood why her own mother did not belong to the court. If she had held titles or estates, why had she given them all up in favor of moving to the tiny fly-speck town in the desert? Millie knew her mother had followed her love for Thane, Millie's father, but there must have been more to it than that. Surely there must be. Marie had never wanted to talk about her past as a noblewoman with Millie. Millie wished her mother had told her something, anything. Was she walking into a viper's nest and not even realizing it? As a 13-year-old, she would cause enough of a stir as it was, being a full 3 years younger than when she had been expected to start her formal training. She hoped Gerald and Kayana would stay on with her once she reached her destination. She would feel naked without their support, she realized. Millie trusted Kayana in particular. Even in so short a time, she felt she could trust the woman completely. Looking over at Kayana, she could see her meditating silently, eyes closed, and muscles loose in her sitting position. Something caught Millie's eye from the window. She noticed a larger brown dot on the horizon. It appeared the tiny dot she had seen earlier this morning had grown in size, and appeared to be moving with them. It could not possibly be a small town as she had originally thought. Could it be the merchant caravan they were scheduled to meet up with? She should tell Gerald, but Millie didn't want to disturb Kayana in the middle of her meditation. Moving towards the door of the wagon, Millie carefully clicked it open, mindful of her bulky dress, hoping not to lose her footing as she moved up towards the front of the caravan. The wind whipped up around her, blowing red locks into her eyes that she had to brush away with one hand as she clambered up the side of the wagon. She held herself by one of the handholds as she tentatively moved forwards towards the front of the caravan. The heat pressed at her, but the wind at least gave a small reprieve. She could see the backs of Gerald's and Jess's heads popping into view behind the horses, raised up in their high-vaunted cart. Millie tried to give greetings, but her words were stolen away by the swiftly moving wind. Shielding her face and gasping for breath, she clambered up to join them.